There are wounds that scream, and there are wounds that whisper. Rejection is loud. Someone says no, someone walks away, someone closes the door in your face. It hurts, but at least it speaks. Emotional neglect is different. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't explain. It doesn't even say goodbye. It just goes quiet, and that silence slowly eats you alive. This is the pain no one warns you about, because silence doesn't look violent. But inside your mind, it never stops echoing. You don't ask, why did they reject me? You ask something far worse. Did I even matter at all? That question changes a person. Rejection is a cut. Silence is a slow poison. Rejection hurts because it ends something, but emotional neglect hurts because it never ends. When someone rejects you, there is clarity. You know where you stand. You know what happened. You know the story has an ending, even if it's painful. But when someone emotionally neglects you, there is no ending. No explanation, no closure, no final sentence. Your mind stays trapped in the middle of the story, replaying it again and again, hoping the silence will eventually speak. And that's where the real damage begins. Because the human brain is not designed to tolerate unanswered emotional questions. It will invent answers if none are given. And most of the time, those answers turn against you. Silence forces the mind to blame itself. Rejection says, I choose something else. Silence says, you're not even worth choosing against. And that distinction matters more than most people realize. When someone openly rejects you, the pain stays external. It hurts, but it stays outside your identity. But emotional neglect pushes the pain inward. It makes you question your value, your worth, your existence in the emotional world. Your mind starts whispering dangerous thoughts. If I mattered, they would have said something. If I was important, I wouldn't be ignored. If I was lovable, they wouldn't disappear. Silence doesn't attack you directly. It lets you attack yourself. That's why emotional neglect reshapes people from the inside. The Stoic warning about unseen damage. Stoic philosophy warned about this centuries ago, long before psychology gave it a name. The Stoics understood that what harms us most is not events themselves, but what those events do to our inner dialogue. And silence is the perfect weapon against inner stability, because silence offers no facts, only space. And in that space, the mind becomes its own enemy. You don't suffer because someone is gone. You suffer because your thoughts have no boundary anymore. The Stoics believe that peace begins when the mind stops begging reality to explain itself. But emotional neglect keeps you begging, waiting, hoping, reading meaning into nothing. That state drains the soul. Why silence feels like erasure. Rejection acknowledges your presence. Even if it hurts, it recognizes that you exist. Silence does something more brutal. It treats you as if your emotions don't require acknowledgement, and to the human nervous system, that feels like erasure. Not being hated hurts less than being ignored. Not being loved hurts less than being unseen. Silence sends a message without words. Your emotional experience is irrelevant, and that message lodges deep. People who endure emotional neglect often don't say, they hurt me. They say, I feel empty. I feel invisible. I feel like I'm fading. Because silence doesn't break you loudly. It dissolves you quietly. The body remembers what the mouth never said. Here's the part most people don't understand. Even when silence happens externally, the body responds internally. Your nervous system reacts to emotional neglect as a threat. Heart rate changes. Sleep becomes fragmented. Anxiety appears without a clear cause. Why? Because the body is wired to detect connection as safety, and silence signals uncertainty. Your system stays alert, waiting for a signal that never comes. This is why emotional neglect is exhausting. Not dramatic, not explosive, just endlessly tiring. You are always waiting, even when you think you've moved on. Why closure feels impossible. People often say, just move on. Stop thinking about it. They don't owe you an explanation. And technically they're right. But emotionally, that advice misses something critical. Closure doesn't come from answers. It comes from accepting the absence of answers. That's a Stoic truth most people struggle to live because the mind wants symmetry, cause and effect, question and response. Silence breaks that symmetry. And until you understand that silence is the answer, you remain trapped. Not because the other person holds power over you, but because you keep expecting them to explain something they already expressed through absence. The difference between pain and suffering. The Stoics made a sharp distinction. Pain happens. Suffering is optional. Rejection causes pain. Silence causes suffering. Why? Because rejection is finite. Silence invites interpretation. And interpretation is endless. Every unanswered message becomes a new story. Every quiet moment becomes a new theory. Every memory becomes evidence in a trial that never ends. You are both the prosecutor and the defendant, and there is no verdict. That's why silence hurts more. When silence comes from someone you loved, emotional neglect hurts most when it comes from someone who once offered warmth. The contrast amplifies the wound. Your mind doesn't compare them to strangers. It compares them to who they used to be. And that comparison keeps reopening the pain. You don't miss the person as they are now. You miss the version of them that made you feel seen. Silence turns that memory into a ghost. And ghosts are harder to let go of than enemies. A Stoic reframe that changes everything. Here is the turning point. Stoicism teaches that we suffer most when we demand emotional clarity from people who are incapable of giving it. Silence is not always cruelty. Sometimes it's incapacity. Sometimes it's avoidance. Sometimes it's emotional immaturity. But none of those require your continued suffering. When you stop interpreting silence as a verdict on your worth, it loses its poison. Silence stops being a mirror and becomes just a condition, not a definition of you. The first step toward freedom. Freedom does not begin when they speak. It begins when you stop waiting for them to. This doesn't mean suppressing pain. It means refusing to let ambiguity rule your inner world. The Stoics believe that dignity is preserved when you reclaim authorship of your meaning. Silence cannot define you unless you allow it to. And that realization is uncomfortable at first, because it removes the illusion that relief will come from outside. But it also restores something powerful. Control. Silence doesn't just hurt once. It teaches. Over time, emotional neglect rewires how you relate to people, to yourself and to intimacy. Not loudly, not obviously, quietly. How emotional neglect trains you to need less and expect less. One of the most dangerous effects of emotional neglect is not sadness. It's adaptation. When silence repeats itself, the mind starts adjusting expectations downward. You stop reaching out. You stop asking questions. You stop expressing needs. Not because you don't have them anymore, but because experience has taught you they won't be met. This is how emotionally neglected people become low maintenance. And the world praises that. You're so independent. You don't need much. You're so strong. But underneath that strength is often a quiet resignation. The belief that wanting more only leads to disappointment. Stoicism never taught the elimination of desire. It taught discernment. There's a difference between not needing validation and believing you are undeserving of care. Silence blurs that line. Why neglected people become hyper-independent. Emotional neglect creates a subtle rule in the nervous system. Relying on others is unsafe, so you adapt. You become self-sufficient to the point of isolation. You handle everything alone. You process pain internally. You don't ask for help, even when you need it. Not because you're proud, but because dependency once led to silence. And silence hurt more than struggle. The Stoics valued self-reliance, but they never confused strength with emotional exile. True Stoic strength is not emotional numbness. It's emotional clarity without attachment to outcomes. Neglect teaches detachment through pain. Stoicism teaches detachment through understanding. They look similar from the outside. They are not the same on the inside. Emotional numbness is not peace. Many people mistake emotional numbness for healing. I don't feel it anymore. I'm fine. It doesn't affect me now, but numbness isn't resolution. It's suspension. Silence conditions you to shut down emotional expression because expression once led nowhere. So you stop feeling deeply, not selectively, but globally. Joy becomes muted. Connection feels distant. Intimacy feels risky. This is not peace. This is self-protection taken too far. The Stoics never advocated emotional shutdown. They advocated emotional sovereignty. There is a difference. Why silence makes you over-accommodating. Another quiet consequence of emotional neglect is over-accommodation. You become someone who accepts late replies, accepts unclear intentions, accepts emotional crumbs, accepts inconsistency, because silence taught you that asking for clarity risks losing connection entirely. So you stay quiet too. You don't want to be too much. You don't want to push. You don't want to scare people away. Ironically, this often attracts people who benefit from your silence, and that reinforces the cycle. Stoicism breaks this pattern with one core principle. What depends on you must not be surrendered to what does not. Your self-respect depends on you. Someone else's responsiveness does not. The illusion that one day they'll explain. One of the deepest traps of emotional neglect is hope without evidence. The belief that someday they'll reach out, they'll explain, they'll finally say what happened. This belief keeps the wound open. Stoicism offers a harsh but freeing truth. Closure is not something you receive. It's something you decide. Silence already answered you. Not with words, but with behavior. And behavior is always the most honest language. Waiting for an explanation keeps you emotionally tethered to someone who has already let go. Letting go does not require understanding why. It requires accepting what is. Reclaiming your inner authority. The most damaging effect of emotional neglect is not loneliness. It's the loss of inner authority. You start outsourcing your sense of worth to someone else's responsiveness. You feel okay when they engage. You feel small when they disappear. This is emotional dependency disguised as patience. Stoicism recenters authority where it belongs, inside. Not through ego, not through denial, but through grounded self-command. Your worth does not fluctuate based on someone else's silence. Silence reflects capacity, not value. That distinction changes everything. A Stoic exercise for breaking the silence loop. Here is a practical Stoic reframe. Ask yourself this question: what does this silence actually prove? Not what you fear it proves, not what your pain suggests. What does it factually prove? It proves they are not communicating. It proves they are unavailable or unwilling. It proves the connection lacks reciprocity. It does not prove you are unworthy. It does not prove you are forgettable. It does not prove you were insignificant. Silence gives information about them, not a verdict about you. Repeat this until your nervous system learns it. Learning to choose clarity over familiar pain. Emotional neglect becomes addictive because it's familiar. You know the pattern, you know the disappointment, you know the silence. Clarity feels scarier because it forces choice. Stoicism teaches that discomfort chosen is better than comfort endured. Choosing people who communicate clearly may feel unfamiliar at first, even uncomfortable, but unfamiliar does not mean unsafe. Silence trained you to survive. Clarity teaches you to live. You were not too much, you were unmet. One of the cruelest lies silence leaves behind is this: I asked for too much? Most of the time, you didn't. You asked the wrong person. Stoicism never teaches minimizing yourself to fit others. It teaches aligning yourself with reality. And reality shows that emotional neglect is not a reflection of excessive need. It is a reflection of limited capacity. Stop shrinking to fit silence. Silence is not a standard to live by. The final Stoic truth about silence. Here is the truth that ends the cycle. You don't heal by being heard by the person who stayed silent. You heal by hearing yourself again, by trusting your perception, by honoring your emotional experience, by refusing to internalize absence as judgment. Rejection hurts. But silence teaches the wrong lesson if left unchallenged. Stoicism gives you the tools to challenge it, not by forcing answers, but by reclaiming your inner equilibrium. Silence loses its power the moment you stop waiting for it to speak.